inside today. So I'm sitting at my kitchen table, and then this is the window that looks into our front yard, and there's like a little kind of like a skylight type feature, a bus, and that's what this is coming down from, and I can't get that to go away unless if I have something up here. Look, wait for it. See, there it goes. If I don't have anything to put up there, like a little box in the future if we're gonna do it in here, because the weather will be turning soon. And right now, in this, while brother boy is sleeping in the bedroom down the hall, so I just thought I would stay in here this morning and also just kind of test out what I like to record inside versus out at the picnic table, because we will have to be coming in soon. So we are reading Driven to Distraction. We're still in chapter 1, kind of moving only at a few, about 5 pages at a time. We finished with Maria's case yesterday, or was it the day before? And now we are on to case number 4, Penny. So again, this is Driven to Distraction. This is a book written about attention deficit disorder originally in the mid-90s, and then revised and updated in 2011. So again, there's still been a lot learned since 2011, but this is known to be like one of the more groundbreaking books on the understanding of ADD, ADHD, and for people that have it and for people that know people that have it. Say if it's your partner or your child or a parent, someone that you work with, someone that works for you. And this is to really understand, and I think a lot of it is helps with forgiveness for people that have it. There's a lot of self-forgiveness when you're seeing, hey, look at this, look how many other people are struggling with the same stuff that I am. And then also maybe like a little bit of hope, learning that this isn't something that gets cured, but something that is learned to be able to be managed. So that I feel like is some of the healing notions, healing magic, is just seeing, hey, I'm not alone in this. This isn't me. I'm not broken. I'm not worthless. I'm not bad. The problem isn't me. The problem is this thing that I have, and so many other people have it, and here's how they have coped with it and then restructured their lives in ways to live the lives that they want to live. So again, Driven to Distraction. Hi, Tyne. Welcome. Okay, we're going to case number 4, Penny. Penny McBride's parents came to see me after Penny's 5th grade teacher suggested she get a psychiatric evaluation. I don't know what to think, her mother said at our first appointment. Her hands were interlocked at the tips of her fingers, and she was looking down at them as she spoke. I hate to think we've done anything wrong. Coming to see me doesn't mean you've done something wrong, I said, noting to myself that it is still the case, although much so than it was 20 or 30 years ago, that consulting a psychiatrist about your child carries a stigma in many people's minds. What's going on with Penny? She's falling behind, her father said. That's all. She's a good girl. Never any trouble. She just daydreams all the time, her mother picked up. Ever since I can remember, she's been my little dreamer, my throwaway child. Tell him about the stories, the father interrupted. She's my youngest, my baby, Mrs. McBride continued, holding up one finger to her husband to say, just 1 minute. We had 4 children 2 years apart, and then 6 years later, Penny appeared. I had more time for her than I did the others. She was easier because she was quieter, more like me, I guess, than the 4 boys. I loved the boys. She paused and looked out my 3rd floor window at the trees beyond, seeming for a moment to be lost in remembrance of her sons. Then she clicked back into the room. But Penny and I were more tuned into each other from the start, I think. When you had 4 boys and never had a girl, well, you forget what being a girl is all about almost. And when Penny arrived, nothing against you, Joe, or the boys, but it was as if a compatriot had joined my life. I don't mean that we were enmeshed or entangled or whatever the psychological term is for an over-involved mother, because we were not. Believe me, we weren't. But in a house full of males, it was good to have balance for me for a. Anyway, the stories Joe was referring to are stories Penny and I up. We called them faraway stories, about children who lived in faraway land. The name came to me when I was telling Penny a story. She was 3, and the look in her eyes was so far away. I wanted to come join her wherever she was. So I said, let's go to Faraway Land. And that's where the stories started. She liked the stories? I asked. Oh, she loved them. I could calm her down almost any time with a story. Not that she got upset very often. Could she add to the stories? I asked, like make things up? A crude assessment of imaginative and linguistic ability is a capacity to add on to a storyline. She was better at listening, her mother said. I could tell story after story, and she would sit next to me, rocking and smiling. If I asked her a question, it would become clear some of the story had passed right by her, because she was so far away. I'd tell myself. But I didn't know what I meant by that. It was just a feeling I had. It sounds like you were well attuned to her, I said. But now I think she wasn't getting it at all. She did love to listen, though. Regret began to fill Mrs. McBride's voice. Why didn't I get some help sooner? Joe McBride, a ruddy-faced man smartly dressed in a business suit and a muted purple and turquoise tie, put his arm around his wife as she started to cry. Sitting together on my office couch, they looked frightened and embarrassed. What Polly means, Joe said, is that we had no idea anything was wrong. Penny was a quiet little girl, though. I understand, I said. Try to go easy on yourselves. You're obviously concerned parents. It was hard for you to come here at all. Let's see if I can't make it worth your while. Wearing a red wool sweater, jeans, and her slightly graying blonde hair up in a bandana, Polly looked like she'd come directly from a hike with her children. She was a casual contrast to her more packaged public husband. It's a bit of a shock to the system to hear your daughter needs to see a psychiatrist, she said, wiping her eyes not with the handkerchief her husband offered her, but with the first knuckle of each hand. We began to get more history, and the key to making a diagnosis in this complicated field is the story of the child's life, rather than through complicated tests. What emerged was a picture of an intelligent girl who had some language and attention problems. Problems in the development of language can occur at a number of levels in a number of ways. One can have difficulty with input or with output. Input problems, or what are receptive language problems, can affect both what you take in and what you are able to out, because what you put out is dependent on what you are able to take in. Output problems, or what are called expressive language problems, affect what you are able to write or speak as well as you are able to conceptualize in your brain. Although a full discussion of learning and language problems, including dyslexia, is well beyond the scope of this book, we cannot discuss ADD without some mention of language problems and learning disability in general, since they so often coexist with ADD, each usually making the other worse. In addition, we will have to touch on neurological problems that can mimic or exacerbate ADD, from the obvious, such as hearing impairment, nearsightedness, or nerve problems that affect articulation, to the more subtle aphasias and memory problems and seizure disorders. I asked Polly if Penny were late in learning to talk. Although developmental milestones, as these moments of specific achievements are referred to, are not etched in stone, they do give a quick reference point as to whether it is a developmental delay worth investigating. You also have to be sure and the parent have the same definition of early or late. Some parents consider their child late if he or she cannot recite Shakespeare by 10 months, while others consider no language at all until age 3 is just fine, if not Eve. Yes, she was, Polly said. Her first words didn't come until about 22 months, and little sentences didn't come until she was 3. Our pediatrician suggested that I read to her and make up stories together. That's where the faraway stories came from. She liked them? I asked. She loved them. That's what was so touching. Even though I knew she wasn't getting it at all, she'd sit still and ask to hear more stories. And if I stopped in the middle, she'd pull on my arm and say, I want more. Could she play with the words at all? I asked. What do you mean? Polly responded. You know, make rhymes, repeat rhymes, make up nonsense words. Polly, who was leaning forward eagerly, interrupted to answer. She couldn't do rhymes exactly, but she made up words all the time. She couldn't think of the right word, so she'd make one up. Instead of saying, we're going to the airport, she'd say, going to the plane place. Or instead of birthday present, she'd say, box day thing. You remember these well. What would you do when she said them? I would correct her. Shouldn't I have? No, it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to get a sense of what it was like for her emotionally. She would say the new phrase I told her. I didn't want her to think she was stupid. Did you think she was stupid? No, not at all, Polly said emphatically. If I thought she was stupid, I probably wouldn't have corrected her so easily. But I knew she was smart and would want to get to the right word. Plus, I thought her ability to improvise and make words up proved she was. You're right, I said. It sounds like her problem finding the right word in her storage bin, so to speak, or in finding the right storage bin, or in remembering the word, or in transporting the word storage bin to her mouth. This sounds pretty complicated, Polly said. Well, it is, I said. But that's really good news that it's complicated, and that we know that it's complicated. Not so long ago, we seemed to think this was all very simple. You were either smart or you were stupid. Oh, we had some ultra categories like genius and moron, but it was all based on a really simple-minded notion of intelligence. Smart versus stupid. And that was the basic ball game. But lately, I've been finding out how complicated intelligence and learning really are. For example, Mel Levine, one of the great figures in the world of learning problems, talks about 7 kinds of memory, and you can have a problem with any one of them that interfere with learning. That's what I was referring to when I was talking about getting words out of the storage bins. I just wanted to think of some analogy. You get what I mean? Yes, I do, and it's exciting, they said. What about in school? What happened then? Well, she fell behind in reading from the start. Well, that's not quite true, honey, Polly said, gently containing her annoyance with the performance appraisal approach. She was more interested in books than any of the kids. She just couldn't comprehend them all. But she always wanted me to read to her, and she still likes to hear the faraway stories even to this day. What about the daydreaming? I asked. Polly handed me a stack of papers. These are teacher reports going back to first grade. You'll see they all say about the same thing. Tunes out, seems shy, can't pay attention without frequent reminders. But it wasn't until this year that Becky Truesdale, who? I interrupted. Becky Truesdale, her 5th grade teacher. She was the first to bring up the possibility of ADD or a learning disorder. I have to admit, I'd never even heard of ADD. I only knew about hyperactivity in boys, but Becky says girls can get it, and sometimes there's no hyperactivity, just tuning out. Becky's right, I said. Girls can have ADD as well as boys. Hyperactivity is the old name for the syndrome. More recently, the label ADD was invented to focus on the symptom of attention inconsistency these kids have. A lot of girls who have it never get diagnosed. Instead, they're just thought of as shy or quiet or even depressed like Penny. In giving the McBrides an overview of the ADD syndrome, I stressed that ADD was often found in particularly creative and intuitive children. Lots of kids who have ADD also have something else. Something we don't have a name for, something good. They can be highly imaginative and empathetic, closely attuned to the moods and thoughts of people around them, even as they are missing most of the words that are being said. The key is to make the diagnosis early before the kids start getting stuck in school with all kinds of pejorative labels. With some help, they can really blossom. I took a few minutes to read through the teacher comments, which, as Polly had told me, were full of description of absent-mindedness and daydreaminess or unfinished work. Comments reminded me of a term Priscilla Vale uses in reference to children who don't quite Fit any mold exactly. Conundrum kids. Would you like to meet Penny? Polly asked. Well, of course, I said, but why don't I go to her? Often kids with ADD can focus very well in the one-on-one situation of the doctor's office. In here, there is structure and novelty, both of which drastically reduce ADD symptoms. Even the fear of a child sometimes feels in the doctor's office can increase concentration and therefore mask the ADD symptoms. That's why it can be so easy for the pediatrician to miss the diagnosis. The symptoms just aren't there in the office. In a classroom, you get a truer picture. So, may I visit? Polly McBride enthusiastically agreed and made arrangements with Becky Truesdale. Schools are quite receptive to this kind of visit. They are eager to share what they know. What they have to say is usually of great value. I slipped quietly into the classroom during what looked like math and took an empty chair along the bookshelves in one corner of the room. Another teacher who had guided me to the classroom pointed Penny out before she left. I watched her, trying not to stare. She was a cute little brown-haired girl with a ponytail, wearing a yellow dress and Nike sneakers. Her desk was where I'm sure she wanted to be, at the back of the room, right next to a window. Now, I should put a word here about windows and schools and ADD. One can easily get the idea from a school that thinks windows are the devil's own work, placed in schoolrooms as a means of temptation, pure and simple. The good children look away from the windows while the bad cannot resist their transparent allure, free passage to the sky and trees and daydream beyond. People with ADD who look out the windows. People with ADD do look out the windows. They do not stay on track. They stray. But they also see new things or find new ways to see old things. They are not just the tuned out of this world. They are all tuned in, often to the fresh and the new. They are often the inventors and the innovators, the movers and the doers. Good doobies they may not always be, but we should. But what of these devilish windows? Is it so bad, a sure mark of educational decline to look out them? I wonder instead if it isn't the duller child who does not look out the windows. Penny's eye certainly found its way there, as she sat, her right cheek comfortably contained in the palm of her right hand. The fingers of her left hand tapped soundlessly on the wooden desk while she gazed out the window. I looked to see what she saw, but I could only see sky and an ascending branch of a nearby tree. That's one thing about window staring. You can never really tell what the other person is seeing out there. Every now and again, usually in response to a noise of some sort, Penny would look toward the blackboard and the numbers that were accumulating. Today's board was sprouting fractions by the minute. Penny must have seen something in them because she'd wrinkle her brow now and again when she looked at them. She didn't seem troubled, just serenely uncomprehending. Then she'd brush back her hair and, as if following the trail of a speck of dust, slowly turn her head back out the window. She made no noise. She caused no disturbance whatsoever. If anything, her serenity lent a calming influence into the classroom. It was easy to imagine how she could go unnoticed over the years. I introduced myself to her after class, as there was a break for recess. Her parents had told her I'd be coming. "Hello, Dr. Hallowell," she said with a big smile. "My mom said that you're a nice man." "Well, you have a nice mom," I said. "Did she tell you anything else?" "Well, I don't think so," Penny said, her face contorting into something I'm supposed to remember, but I can't. "That's okay," I said. "Do you want to get outside for recess?" Mom said you might want to talk to me," Penny said. "Well, just for a second. Your mom and dad came to see me to ask if I could help with how things go for you in school and stuff. Do you like school?" "Oh, yes," Penny said enthusiastically. "Well, what do you like about it?" I asked. "I like the teacher, and I like the other kids, and I like the walk to get from home, and I like the time to sit and listen." "Well, what do you listen to?" I asked. "Oh, to anything," Penny said. "Mostly my own thoughts. I like to make up stories in my head. Mom and I kind of have a game." She told me about it," I said. "Sounds like fun. Is that what you were doing during math class this morning?" "Yes," she said. I was making up one of those fat old men who looked like sixes and funny old men who looked like nines. And then they went dancing together and turned into eights. Well, that's great, Penny. Do you think the eight will get back to sixes and nines? Maybe, she said, pulling at the yellow spangled stretch band around her ponytail. I was actually going to have them lie down and become binoculars so that I could see very far away. All the way to Faraway Land, I said. Yes, she said, blushing a little bit that I knew the name of the place in her stories. Is there anything you don't like about school? I asked. Penny looked down at her sneakers. Well, I'm behind all the time. I don't get the homework. Well, maybe we can find you some help with that, I said. Recess is almost over, I bet. Maybe we could meet sometime later when you're not in school. Sure, Penny said, but you'll have to my mom. She makes all my appointments. Of course, I said. Great meeting you. I'll see you later. Becky Truesdale was a young teacher just out of teaching internship at a private school near Boston. She knew a lot about ADD and learning abilities. I'm so glad you could come, she said to me. I didn't want to call on Penny in class so you'd see how she is when she's left alone. She's really smart, you know. I said, and she seems happy, at least today. I thought I heard a trace of a southern accent in Becky's words. Are you from the South? I asked, the impulsivity of my ADD overcoming the tact and sequentiality I should have given the exchange. Why, yes, Becky said, not annoyed at my change of subject. I grew up in Charleston until my family moved to Maine. I wish I had known this. I could have given her that little bit of a, why, yes, I grew up in Charleston until my family moved to Maine. From Charleston, South Carolina. Quite a change, for sure. And you? Well, I actually lived a few years in Charleston myself, I did, as a kid. We paused. How long have you known Penny? I asked. Well, just since the beginning of the school year. 6 weeks, not long enough to know her well, but long enough to like her. She reminds me of a young artist or something, sitting in the back dreaming. Do you think she's depressed? I asked. No, Becky said with a laugh. Far from it. She brightens right up whenever you talk to her. The others like her. Even when she stands off, they don't pick on her. It's as if they accept that's just her way. Well, what's your main concern about her? I asked. Well, that she really isn't with us, Becky said without hesitation. And I'm afraid that the further she goes in school, the more of a problem that will become. Even in this class, she misses a lot, but somehow she compensates. Still, I know she could be learning more. Becky and I talked until the end of recess, thanked her for her help, and she said goodbye, promising to stay in touch. There was a list of conditions in my mind that could explain Penny's situation. After I met with Penny in person again, met with her parents once more, and got some neuropsychological testing done, that list had narrowed down to 2. Attention deficit disorder without hyperactivity, and both expressive and receptive language disabilities. ADD exacerbates learning problems in the same way that nearsightedness does. You can't focus as well as you should, so you are not able to use the talents you have to the fullest. The first step in treatment is to get glasses, or to treat the ADD, and then reassess the extent of the residual learning disability. Just making the diagnosis, giving a medical name with a rational treatment to what Penny's parents had thought was an immutable quirk of temperament helped a lot. Once everybody understood what was going on, we started medication. While the medication by itself would not be sufficient treatment, the results in this instance were dramatic and quick. There are several medications used in the treatment of ADD. They all help the individual to focus better. In a sense, they act like internal eyeglasses, increasing the brain's ability to focus on one task at a time while filtering out competing stimuli or distractions. Of various medications available at the time, we chose norepinephrine for Penny. Norepinephrine is the class of medications referred to as the tricyclic antidepressants. Although medications in this group are called antidepressants, they have many other uses and then for the treatment of depression, including the treatment of ADD, both in children and adults. The most common other group of medications used to treat ADD are the stimulants. Since the original publication of Driven to Distraction, great strides have been made in the long-acting stimulants such as Concerta and Adderall. Today, they would be our first choice. Although used properly, both groups are extremely safe and effective. Within a few days of Penny's starting medication, her parents as well as Becky were on the phone to me. They were all amazed. She was tuned into class, focused on and participating actively and creatively. Most of all, she was really enjoying school, and in ways she had not enjoyed it before. She was enjoying learning. The medication's only side effect in Penny's case was mild dry mouth by the anticholinergic property of the triclics. That is, they block the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which mediates various bodily functions, including salivation. In other words, it stops from salivating, as happens with many over-the-counter cold remedies. This is tolerable and may be counteracted with a lifesaver or other lozenge. The medication did not take away from Penny. She could still daydream when she wanted to. While this was the beginning of the treatment, it was in many ways the most moving part for everyone, including me. As Penny's mother put it to me in one of our follow-up visits, it's as if a veil has been lifted from Penny's eyes. She can see us, and we can see her. She's still my dreamer, but now it's on purpose that she dreams. All right. So that was Penny's case in Driven to Distraction, recognizing and coping with attention deficit disorder from childhood through adulthood. So in there, I feel like we learned a couple things. One, we get to hear more about a case of little has ADHD or ADD, no hyperactivity, where she's daydreaming and so more like she wasn't a problem per se at all, like she wasn't disruptive to the class, and wasn't like the typical, oh, look at it, they must have ADD bouncing off the walls. It was more of the daydreaming side of ADD, and the teacher was concerned that over time she was probably going to end up falling back, and then this was going to be a problem later in school. So then she talked with the parents. Parents got the sought help, and then found out, hey, it's ADD, and then they medicated it, and then that helped. And again, my take on this with medication, there's more medications that exist in the world that I'm learning about. I've taken Adderall. I know what that does to me, and I feel like it definitely helps. But there's times where I'm wondering if it's the right one, because sometimes I'm seeking more stimulant. Like, I get it, I'm like, hey, this is good. Like, I feel like now I'm in the zone. I can focus on these things and stuff done, instead of everything being so overwhelming that I can't do anything because there's just too much to do. And then the Adderall helps me be like, okay, I can get this. Let's go. Let's move. This thing, done. Okay, on to the next thing. But then I want like caffeine, right? And then so I want like an energy drink, which that is just bad in general. So I want to talk to, talk to a doctor about that and say, hey, is that a problem? Does that mean that this isn't the right thing for me if I'm seeking more? Or do I just need a larger dose? I have a decently small dose compared to what I see some other people taking. So maybe that's a part of it. But also, I think that there's other ways that people are able to maybe find alternatives to medication as well. So I'm never going to be pushing medication, but it's always amazing to see the results of medication and the positive results in that, because maybe that could be what's right for you, or for your child or your partner. And it's definitely things to, definitely to consider. But again, in all of the cases that we read before this, medication was always like the last part of the step, because of the structuring of the schedules and life and organizing of things to help the person stay on track. And medication was like the number 5 out of 1 through 5 steps to take. So there we go. And we will catch up again the next time that we have a moment, right? Take care. Have a good day. And I don't know, should we make up a tagline? And then here's the driven to distraction. Here's for our road to focus. All right. Okay. We'll catch you guys later. Have a good day.